So,
Assalamu
yes,
alaikum.
salam alaikum.
Alaikum assalam.
Well, I hate to interrupt what you were saying because you were on a roll there, my brother. And I love to hear what you have to say. Time being what it is, I'm going to jump in because I've got a lot to say. A lot to say. None more or less valuable than what you have contributed, just on a different vibe that I think is essential for people to know right now. So, if you don't mind, Brother Adib, I'm going to start my presentation, and I want to greet everyone who is present on the line today and welcome them to today's broadcast, to today's presentation. For those of you who I have not met yet and who are not yet familiar with me, my name is Kareema Medina Bilal, and I am the wife, the companion, and the student of our esteemed instructor, Benjamin Bilal. And my presentation this day is called Defeating Diabetes, Starting with the Children. Defeating Diabetes, Starting with the Children. Bismillah Rahman Rahim. I ask Allah to guide my words, to grant that I will say that which you, the listening audience, needs to hear, and that I'll be able to present it in a way that will be not only instructive to you, but pleasing and beneficial to you. That is my intention, that is my prayer for you, and that stated, I'm going to get started. In this presentation, which is called Defeating Diabetes, Starting with the Children, Defeating Diabetes, Starting with the Children, I intend to discuss the impending and current baby formula crisis. I'd like to give it a historical perspective and give you a few more ongoing suggestions to take control of your health and to defeat diabetes. You may wonder, why am I so fixated on diabetes? I would ask you to just take a leisurely journey over to your browser and key in the 10 leading causes of preventable death. The 10 leading causes of preventable death. It will lead you to something called Fast Facts, and it will also lead you to the CDC. What you will see there is that of the 10 leading causes of preventable death, diabetes is at the root of it, of most of them, if not all of them. And if you look at the 10 leading causes of just regular death, not preventable death, but regular death, garden variety death, you'll see that of those 10 that are the leading ones, diabetes also is at the root of at least 7 of those. So, that being the case, I figure if there's an assassin that's looking to take out my people or to take me out, it behooves me to know what that assassin is and to get as many identifying markers as I can and come after him or them before they come after me or mine. Hence, in this part of my life where I've done a lot of accumulating of knowledge and wisdom, and I've halal all of that through the Quran and through experience and through trial and error, since I manage my health care myself and that of my family, I want to pass that on to you because I want for my people, which is not limited to the people that look like me, but all the people who believe in one creator, whatever you shall call that person, and who believe in the sanctity of human life, and who are committed to the growth and the development of the human to the asana state that Allah intended for us. Yes? Yes. So, let's take it apart piece by piece. Bismillah Rahman Rahim. First question regarding the current and impending baby formula crisis. Is there really a shortage? Now, anytime, I would say for the next, I want to say for the next few years, but going forward, given the way things have evolved, anytime something presents itself as a crisis, the first thing you want to do is follow the money trail. Follow the money trail. That's going to lead you 9 times out of 10 to the source of the crisis. And it's going to give you the answer to whether or not it's a genuine crisis or if it's something that was manufactured in order to induce fear in the population and manipulate the public's response into a herd mentality. You probably have heard that word herd before. And I like the consonantal, well, actually, this is not quite yeah, it is. Consonantal connection. It's also a synonym, not a synonym, a homonym, a homonym. Yeah, going back all the way to elementary school, a homonym. That is, words which sound the same, but which have different meanings and are likely spelled differently. And you can also incorporate that, as I encourage you to do with everything that you hear, the consonantal connections and the nunetics method for breaking it down so that you can understand it in its organic fitra state. How's that? Yes, it's a plug for nunetics because I believe in it, because I see it as one of the tools that humanity must have, that is a gift given from Allah, a channel, through his channel. Yeah, it's Instructor Benjamin Bilal. So I believe in it. I follow it. I want to present it to you. Considering the word herd, H-E-R-D, as well as H-E-A-R-D, right? Sound the same, spelled differently, have different meanings, but I believe related meanings, as we know from consonantal connections. So we have heard a rumor, as most of these crises begin, that there is a formula shortage. And as you would expect, whenever a herd, H-E-R-D, hears something that is potentially dangerous, well, they stampede. And where they stampede and what they do in the course of that stampede is dictated by who's ever leading the herd. So, with that in mind, through that lens, I ask you to pay attention to who's leading the stampede on the formula. Remember the toilet paper crisis? During the last, the most, goodness, there have been so many crises in the last 2 years, right? I've got to identify them by name. But in the beginning, during the lockdown, when we were told we'd have to be inside, there was a run on toilet paper. And of course, all the shelves got depleted of toilet paper and there was a shortage. Not that there was any shortage in production of toilet paper, not that there was even a shortage in supply, because there was plenty in the warehouses of those who produce such. However, because there was a stampede in the herd, due to the herd mentality, that heard that we were going to be locked down, that heard there was going to be a shortage, there was indeed a shortage. So how does that pertain to what we're doing here now with baby formula? Well, if you listen to those who say they know, the cause of the shortage and the panic buying is, of course, the virus and Putin and the Republicans, and somehow or another, the present administration had nothing to do with it. Had nothing to do with it. It was those dadgum Republicans. It was them. Remember, there's always the us and them mentality in this whole thing, and it's always them and never us. So say the people in power. that are responsible. So how did this thing get started in the first place? Well, we go back to, well, first of all, let me just document for you, for those who are bean counters, that there appears to be a genuine shortage, whatever the cause, and that is documented or codified, corroborated by an information provider, a retail information provider. That is, those bean counters that watch retail institutions and notice what is out of stock. Notice what appears to be selling, that there's a run on, so they speak. See the connections to herd? A run on formula, a run on toilet paper, right? A run on stocks, herd, herd, herd. I refer you to Baqarah in the Quran, the cattle. Not for nothing did Allah choose that particular animal to be the longest surah in the Quran. I don't know. That's just how it appears to me. So yeah, sales and out of stock conditions have gone up from 30 to 40% in April of this year to 43%, almost half. Almost half retailers are reporting out of stock of baby formula as of the week ending May 8th. And of course, what do people do whenever there's a perceived shortage of things? Well, they produce their own whenever they can. They water down their present supplies of things, or they start rationing it, which is a very bad thing to do when you're talking about children or infants, particularly infants who depend upon this one source for all of their nutrition. So when you start rationing a baby formula so that the baby can only have so much formula because you got to stretch it and make it last, well, that's going to be a problem. When you start watering down what you have to stretch it and make it last, that's going to be a problem, because these things have to have a certain balance of nutrients for the child to thrive, to prosper, to grow. Yeah. And so you see what we call this downstream effects, right? It starts with a perceived shortage, and then therefore people react to it as though it were a bona fide shortage, and therefore it is a shortage, and now people start doing unwise things. Now, I always look to who's giving the leadership, who's giving the instructions, and who profits from the shortage or the crisis conditions. And not surprisingly, right at the top, giving the quote-unquote guidance, reporting the science on this particular crisis is the FDA. Yes, that bastion of reliability and trustworthiness, the FDA. The same people who told you that the current crisis, or the biggest crisis, being the virus, was going to be over once we reached herd immunity, once everybody, a certain percentage of the population, which has increased and increased and increased, 95% now, 100% of the people to be vaccinated, well, then this crisis will be over. Same people. The same people at the front. Now, once you also identify and understand that the advisory board of the FDA, the advisory board of the CDC, are former, in the main, in the majority, former and retired executives of the pharmaceutical companies, then the whole thing starts to make just a little bit more sense. So here's what happened that seemed to bring this up to snuff. And lest you think I'm making this up, you should know that there are 4 companies that control close to 90% of the formula market. Abbott Laboratories, another company called Reckitt Benckiser, Nestle, whose name you should be familiar with, and another company called Perrigo. FYI, just saying, Abbott Laboratories revenue, income, money, dividends for the quarter that ended March 31st of this year, 2022, was $11.895 billion, which was increased 13.76% year over year. I know numbers stupefy some of us, but the bottom line is Abbott Pharmaceuticals, or Abbott Laboratories, excuse me, was making big money and their profits rose. And do you think that the price of formula has remained steady since the crisis, the shortage was announced? I'll bet you if you look, you will find that the price has increased. Interesting. Abbott makes Similac, Alimentum, and Elicare baby formula. Nestle's makes Gerber's. You know, the one with the cherubic looking, very pale child with the curl in the front. Yes. So here's what the FDA has to say in response to the public taking matters into its own hands, as it must, since the present administration seems to not be handling it the way the public would like. I didn't make it up. Approval polls say that the current administration, Biden and company, is at 38% approval rating. That's pretty bad. That means that 62% of the population do not agree with what the president is doing. So, how did this whole thing happen? FDA says this. When people try to come up with their own solutions, right? It says, the FDA discourages parents from making formula at home due to very serious health concerns for babies. Potential problems associated with error in selecting and combining the ingredients for the formula are very serious and range from severe nutritional imbalances to unsafe products that can harm infants. Now, here's just an FYI response to that. When you buy formula, unless you buy it already made, it comes concentrated and it must be diluted according to a certain ratio of formula concentrate and water. Or if it's purchased in the powdered form, which a great deal of them are, then you must add so much powder and so much water. So apparently, the esteemed guidance from a CDC thinks that people are so stupid that they cannot follow a recipe to make formula, which is what they've been doing all along. Now, this could take us back. How was this allowed to happen? How did this whole thing get started in the first place? Was it industrial sabotage? Well, here's what happened. Bacteria was found in formula factories in Michigan. The FDA got involved. The FDA got involved, which in the ideal sense would be a good thing, except that you'd have to trust the FDA to have your best interests at heart, and I don't. And so what happened was, when it was detected, there was a total of 2 infants who died from this. There were 2 mysterious bacteria, the names of which I can't pronounce, and you don't really need to know anyway. So what did they do? They closed down that factory. They told people not to buy that particular kind of formula. And what happened was then the formula production decreased and decreased radically. So when the formula production decreased, obviously formula supply decreased. Therefore, there is a shortage. Therefore, now you have a run on the product. You see the cascade? Now, what's very interesting in this, the FDA and the U.S. government banned the importation of imports. So wait a minute, you can't get it here, but they won't allow you to import formula from abroad. Well, why is that? Well, the fact of the matter is, European formula, according to some people, and according to some research that I have done, is actually better. Better than formula made in the United States. And why is that, or how is that? It's because they will not allow certain things in their formula. Just like you cannot, the European Union and European countries do not allow the importation of American beef because they consider it full of additives and things that they do not want in their meat. But here we can. So what happens here is that the formulas in Europe will not allow certain sugars in it. Specifically, they do not like corn syrup. But corn syrup is a key ingredient in a lot of formulas made in the United States. The European Commission, which is the governing body, requires that at least 30% of the carbohydrates in infant formula come from lactose, but the U.S. doesn't have that. The U.S. formulas contain little or no lactose at all. And the European body says that there are certain things that cannot be used and put in baby formulas, such as they must be gluten-free, and the fat that is in there cannot come from seed oils or used fillers, such as locust gum and guar gum and soluble fibers. So where am I going with this? It means that there's some economic games being played here, as there usually is. And in the middle of that is the American consumer. And I believe that the desired outcome of this whole thing is that people will become so frustrated and so freaked out and afraid and seized by fear that they'll start to war amongst each other and fight amongst each other. And they're already trying to rile things up because people have become somewhat bored with the previous crisis, right? It's really interesting to see that even though Fauci, that deity, that sage, that great wise man who's been leading us so competently through this whole thing, has said that masks are no longer necessary. And yet you will still see people who wear masks, and there are still places that will insist that you wear a mask in order to gain entry, which when we see that, we just don't go. We just don't go to those places. And so generally it has been made an option for the states and for people to decide you can wear a mask or not. But now you see how powerful a tool fear is to guide the behavior and manipulate the behavior of the populace. Because even though it has been definitively proven that unless a person is actively coughing and sneezing and thereby spreading big droplets, a healthy person who's totally asymptomatic has very little chance of spreading the real virus. Now, there's a whole bunch of discussion about viral shedding due to the injection, but I won't go into that. The other thing that I find very interesting here is the history of baby formula. When was it invented? And again, following the economics, I happen to look at futuremarketinginsights.com and look at the forecast for infant formulas. And it was predicted in 2016 to 2020 that there was going to be strong growth in the baby formula market. Now, this is 2022. The forecast from 2016 to 2020 was that there was going to be a bull market, an upswing, a strong growth for profit markets forecast in 2016. How'd they know that? Huh? Well, they say that it's on account of the rising demand for organic baby food across the globe for children under 5. Increasing cases of malnutrition among children and infants have propelled the need for infant formula. Now, you have to ask, why would there be malnutrition among children? That's a big one, which the World Health Organization, which is steered and funded in large part by Bill Gates and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, they're the ones that steer things in the WHO. Now, why are we striving, or why are they striving to push the inoculation when what people really need to be able to feed themselves is access to clean water, access to irrigation technology, access to better and improved sanitation practices, which actually formed the decrease in the diseases that we have seen here in the United States that happen to just coincide with vaccinations. Oh, I said it. I meant to not say that word, but with injections and inoculations. And what's interesting here is rising, I'm just read this again from the worldmarketinginsights.com, rising numbers of working mothers worldwide. Listen, rising numbers of working mothers worldwide has encouraged the baby food companies to introduce nutrition-rich supplement facilitating the need for convenient feeding. Alongside this, companies are adopting eco-friendly ways for packaging material. The players include Nestle, Abbott Nutrition, which are working towards developing animal-free baby food that contains the same nutrients as mother's milk. Now, I don't know if you caught this, but rising numbers of working mothers. Now, why do we need formula in the first place? How did that even come to be a thing? It goes way back. Even in Egypt, they had a need for somebody to feed the baby when the mother died, which was relatively common in many countries across the world, going all the way back to Egypt, when for whatever reason the mother couldn't produce milk. It happens. They have documentation that going back to Egypt and Hippocrates and such people as that, they had preparations or poultices or herb things or potions, that's the best way I can put it, to help mothers lactate when they couldn't do it. So sometimes it's an anatomical thing. The mother's nipples were inverted. Sometimes the mother's health just was such that were she to have nursed the baby, she would have passed along something that would have been harmful to the baby. That's bona fide. That's genuine. That's real. The artificial change in breastfeeding actually occurred in the 1900s. Very interesting. Very interesting. You see, what they used to have was something that we actually saw, I believe, or was attributed to Prophet Muhammad's time, when he had a wet nurse, right? Something happened, the mother died, and somebody had to feed the baby. Well, a mother who's nursing can feed any baby. She didn't have to just feed her own baby. And the nature of the way Allah constructed lactation in the human female is that the more the baby nurses or suckles, the more milk she will produce, provided that she herself has has adequate nutrition and adequate water. Now, I stop here and I go back to developing countries For them to push formula in developing countries is genocide. This was brought very much into the public forum around 1970. Yeah, because Nestle was pushing formula in developing countries, and children were dying left and right because of diarrheal diseases. In other words, diseases which produce diarrhea severe enough to cause dehydration, electrolyte imbalance, and death in a child. How does that happen? They got no clean water. They don't have water sanitation practices, and formula has to be reconstructed with water. You see? So for them to do that, and knowing full well that these developing countries, under the guise of preventing malnutrition or alleviating malnutrition, and push that, they know good and well what they were doing. As the Quran says, they know it like they know their own sons. Savage so-and-sos. But to condense history, and I'm talking about a long, long, long time, there's a couple of things that are consistent through history that should not surprise us. So being a wet nurse was actually a profession for many years, for hundreds of years. It was a profession. And then you had the interpolation or the introduction of doctors. And you have some doctor who advanced the theory that if you allow a woman who is not the baby's natural mother to nurse the baby, then what will happen is that the baby will become attached to the wet nurse and not the mother, that the affections of the mother towards the child will diminish, that the child may pick up some condition from the wet nurse herself, may have some kind of a disease condition that could be inherited. I don't think they mean inherited, let's say transmitted to the child, and that somehow or another in that transmission, the child is now going to transmit that to the parents. Now, of course, all of that can be circumvented and was circumvented in the profession of wet nurses by choosing a healthy, balanced, well-nourished wet nurse, which the wealthy could do. And what you had then was also a decrease in breastfeeding as the natural thing to do when you have a baby, because the rich women thought it was going to ruin their figure, which is absolute bullocks. What do you think you have breasts for? The only reason the human animal has breasts, or the only reason that any mammal has breasts, is to produce milk. They are milk machines. These two things that sit on our chest are milk machines. And when the child nurses, a cascade of benefits which has yet to be fully elucidated accrues to the mother and to the child. But then what happens is that finances got involved. Remember I told you, follow the money trail? Right around the time of the 18th century, which would be the 1700s, through the 19th century, which would be the 1800s, you had the occurrence of the Industrial Revolution. And you also had mass migration from rural areas where you would have had animals that you could have taken milk from, such as goats, such as sheep, such as cows, even horses in some locations. And you had the migration to the cities, and the women had to go to work. So now you have the mother to make a choice between breastfeeding her child or working for industry. And conditions were such that the cost of living, poor wages, especially wage inequality, women had to contribute to their family financially. And that's where the babies lost. And right around that time, formulas started to become introduced. Now, this goes way back. Many of our grandmothers can tell you about this. But It was things like bread soaked in cow's milk. It was called pap. Other formulas were called panada, which was cereals that were cooked in broth. And these were given to children very early, very early. Things were made, the earliest bottles were made out of hollowed out corn, animal horns. Yeah. But when it really got good and started was when the AMA, Morris Fishbein, AMA, this is when the American Medical Association took over and they began to regulate how formulas could be made. Now, in all fairness, there was reason for that because, again, even in the United States, let alone Europe, sterilization practices were not codified or standardized. And a lot of people, I can refer you back to Elizabethan England when you had John Snow, who was first epidemiologist, a wonderful book called The Ghost Map by Stephen Johnson, details in nail-biting form how the cholera epidemic swept through London and killed sometimes 4,000 people in a week. It was due to cholera, and it was later determined that it wasn't the ether, as the doctors of the time said. It wasn't bad humor at the time, was what the doctors thought. It was actually the fact that a water source was linked to a source where sewage, raw sewage, the two combined, and what you got was the mixture of feces and human waste of different sorts mingling with the water supply. And once he shut down that source of water, the number of deaths decreased. And the doctors were very embarrassed because they came at even then, even in the face of evidence, goes to show you the establishments are entrenched in whatever their belief system are, and it's not easy to shake that. Well, it used to be that formulas in the United States were an agreement between the pharmaceutical companies and the doctors. The pharmaceutical companies used to market formula to the doctors, and the doctors would then market it to the public. However, they were able to, at that point, fix it so that the formula industry in 1988 began to advertise directly to the public, antagonizing the medical profession, but increasing profits to the pharmaceutical companies. Like I say, follow the money trail and you'll always get it. And it's right around that time that when formulas rose, and let's look 50s, you had the appearance of TV dinners. Second World War, you had women leaving the home and going into industry to help with the war effort. So what happens? Now food leaves the hands in the province of the mother and becomes the province of companies, industry. And that's exactly what happened with formula. And they began promoting it and promoting it here in the United States, promoting it abroad, to the detriment of many children, because you cannot, no matter what you do, you cannot match what Allah has done. The things that happen in breast milk, you may wonder, just because it has to be said, how the folly of giving an infant an injection for a vaccine. Why do I say that? And why do I feel so strongly about that? Because the infant does not have a developed immune system until at least 6 months, some say a year of life. So if you're giving an injection to stimulate the immune system, there ain't one. There's nothing to stimulate. However, Allah, that great creator, that fashioner, that engineer, master engineer, fixed it so that in breast milk there is hydrogen peroxide, which white blood cells use, which most of the cells in the bodies use to inactivate and to kill invading pathogens. Allah did that. Yeah. And that helps to stimulate the infants and to create the infant's gut biome, right? Because in the womb, it didn't have such, but it does, and it gives it exactly what it needs in the amount that it needs. The infant's saliva stimulates breast milk production. How elegant is that? Then you start having you've come a long way, baby, and you don't need to have, it began to denigrate motherhood and to celebrate or to cause the susceptible individuals to think that having a career, making money for somebody else, is more important than raising a human being and helping another human being. I mean, this is the same thing that you have now. This is the foolishness with the assault on the Supreme Court with Roe v. Wade. You have this, oh, it's my body. You shouldn't be able to tell me whether or not I want to have a baby. Well, see, what they're not telling you is how much money the abortion industry generates. It generates billions of dollars per year. And when a woman signs on to have an abortion, she says that they can dispose of what's called the products of conception / developing embryo, developing baby. They can do that, and they can do with it what they want. And so from that, they get stem cells. From that, they use cells upon which to conduct research. And they get it for free, not to mention the people that provide the abortion. So don't get it twisted. This whole thing is interrelated. So you have these women, insanity. They don't recognize, this is what ingratitude is. It is an amazing privilege to be able to create a human being. It is an amazing privilege. Ask any woman who wants to have a child and can't. It's an amazing privilege to be able to create a human being. So you have these folks, these detached from the fitra folks, walking around talking about, well, if I don't want to have a baby, I shouldn't have to. Well, the decision that you make to do that, little girl, is before you lay down and open legs. I'm definitely pro-choice, and the choice is the choice to either use something to prevent pregnancy, or recognize the fact that the sex act is an act of reproduction. Say what you want about the romance of it. That's just so that you'll make you want to do it. This is grandma talking now. This is old school, sitting on the porch, spitting snuff wisdom here. If you're going to have sex, you have to recognize one of two things is going to happen. Either you're going to make a baby or you're going to use something so that you don't. So ladies, if you're really all that concerned of the control of your body, then you should exercise that choice before you lay down with somebody. And men, folks, you need to value your sperm. We can't do it without you, although there are those who think they can, but we can't do it without you. You have to have a man, at least at this point, to create a fitra human being. These other things that they're doing on Dr. Moreau, the Isle of Dr. Moreau. You want to see a scary, scary picture? Watch the Isle of Dr. Moreau, Moreau, with Marlon Brando. That was so. Now, my family, there are people in my family that can watch bona fide, certified horror flicks and not flinch. But we had to walk away. We had to turn that one off and go out and take a walk because that one was so out there. But these are the people that are trying to redefine gender, redefine sex, redefine biology, and that's the Isle of Dr. Moreau. So diversion from there back to breastfeeding. These same people, hey, I don't want to ruin my body by breastfeeding. No, so what you want is implants that man has made. Huh? So that you can have those things rupture and cause all kinds of immune system diseases later on so that you can have breasts to show and sell cars. Come on now. Women, we have to have a better opinion of ourselves than that. Hollywood is it's an illusion. And all those women that you see that have the pert upturned breasts that look like they've never had a child, these are manufactured things. And any man that does not want you after your body has gone through the rigors of bearing his child is not a man that's worthy of you. I said it. Any one of y'all out there, come back to me with that. I'm sorry, I get excited. So here's the other thing I got to tell you. It shouldn't surprise you. I looked up, let's see, this is CNN Business. And guess what? I found an article by Millie Chan, CNN Business, dated May 3rd, 2022. Lab-grown human milk may be just 3 years away. This is brought to you from the people that want to bring you lab-grown meat and lab-grown burgers. And not surprising, who's at the bottom of it? The World Health Organization. And who funds the World Health Organization? The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, who want to vaccinate everybody on the planet and who believe that there are too many human beings. These are the people that want to manufacture breast milk in the lab. It says, globally, only 1 in 3 babies receives as much breast milk in their first 6 months as experts recommend, say the World Health Organization. Instead, many parents rely on formula. So if we just dissect that for 1 minute, how does that happen? How is it that babies don't receive as much breast milk in the first years? Is it because the mother doesn't produce it? She doesn't produce it because if she doesn't nurse the baby, the body in its wisdom, given by Allah, will say, well, there's no need for us to do this because she ain't nursing the baby. In this case, demand directs supply. The more the baby nurses, the more milk you make, the more weight you lose, and you get back your pre-pregnant figure. Or, I mean, listen, weight loss, when you, if there was such a thing as a natural weight loss, it is when you breastfeed, because your body puts on that extra 25 pounds so that you will have reserves in order to nurse your baby for the first year, or at least the first 6 months, until the baby gets a set of teeth and gets the gut, the intestinal stuff that it needs to be able to digest solid foods. Allah set that up. And it gets deranged because they've convinced us that if you are a mother, well then somehow or another you're being forced to subjugate your own potential, as though mothering was something to be ashamed of. Savages. Savages. I can't even say that's animal, because animals have better sense. And again, the same people are right there. And they say that it hopes to combine the nutrition of breast milk with the practicality of formula. So when a mother breastfeeds, the milk is always fresh. It is always at the optimal temperature. It is always in demand as long as the mother has adequate water and adequate nutrition. Well, if you support the mother, she'll do that. In Europe, they have 1 year maternity leave. A woman gets a doula. She essentially gets a nanny for 1 year in the UK. United States, you may get 6 weeks, 8 weeks if you have a cesarean. What kind of savagery is that? Oh, but then you get to have this bio milk, right? It better matches the nutritional profile of breast milk than formula, right? And it creates its product from cells taken from human breast tissue. All these ladies having breast surgery, all these ladies having mastectomies, from breast tissue and milk donated by women in the local community. But here, they're compensated. They get a Target gift card in return. Wow. Wow. And then they grow the cells in flasks, feeding them nutrients, and then incubates them in a bioreactor that mimics the environment in a breast. Here, the cells absorb more nutrients and secrete more milk substances. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you really think that you can duplicate breast milk, I have some land, I have a bridge that I'd like to sell you. So, what's this got to do with diabetes? Well, guess who the biggest purchaser, the biggest buyer of baby formula is in the United States? The WIC program. WIC, Women, Infants, and Children. They buy the majority of formula. What's this got to do with diabetes? Well, in the WIC program, they encourage the purchase of formula, which you give the baby, and of course, no other animal. Uh, Lactation generally is unispecies, it's species specific. So you don't generally have animals, elephants feeding lions. Although they could, but they don't. You don't have bears lactating and bear mothers lactating and breastfeeding dogs, even though there's some ancient connection between them, right? You don't have cats breastfeeding dogs, generally, right? In this domesticated environment, anything can happen on the Isle of Dr. Moreau. But getting back to what I was saying, what we notice in the WIC program is that they encourage the giving of juice to children. What's the link to diabetes? Juice is sugar. It's liquid sugar. You've heard me speak on this many times, but there's been an increase in the rates of diabetes in children, especially in those income groups that participate in the WIC program and the school lunch program, the school breakfast program, because what are they given? Refined, processed carbohydrates, high fructose corn syrup, chocolate milk. There was even an attempt by the dairy industry to put sugar in regular plain milk so that children would drink more of it. Bottom line, the increase in the ingestion and the consumption of sugar and artificial fats has contributed to the obesity and diabetes epidemic that we have, but you don't hear them talking about that. You just hear them say that if you have diabetes, well, you need to take more insulin and you need to take this newest drug that you'll hear advertised on the television that you can't pronounce, and that at the end of which, when the person is speaking very quickly at the end of the commercial, will tell you that if you take it, it'll kill your kidneys or you'll die. But it'll fix your diabetes. Ha. All right. So what am I saying to you here? Because I'm at that point when I need to yield the mic. What do I want you to know? I want you to know that it is now more important than ever for you to take control of your health. The formula crisis is only a crisis if you're not breastfeeding. If you're breastfeeding, it's just news. Huh? Now, if you're one of those who made the decision to breastfeed and now you find yourself in the thick of it, do you know that the formula, and you'll find it online if you look, what we, in my day, so this would be the 1950s, 1940s, all the way up to 1970, when I actually see and have, I wish there was a way for me to forward it to you. I'll ask Instructor Bilal to do it. The formula, we used to make it out of evaporated milk, or they call it pet milk, carnation milk, and liquid vitamins, Karo corn syrup, and water diluted. Now, what was interesting about this was it is not new to make formula from cow's milk. But what the parents used to do, or what the wise mothers used to do, is they would always boil the milk ahead of time, which is pasteurization. That's essentially what pasteurization is. Taking a liquid or substance to a point where all potential pathogens would be killed. Now, what also happens is at a certain high temperature, proteins are what we call denatured. That is to say, the protein and the way it's constructed changes, and it often will make things more digestible or less likely to cause an allergic response. And this is what mothers used to do. And the formula for that, you can find it online. I've probably, I don't wish to, I say just look it up. Look it up. You can find it. And we used to have that formula. I was breastfed, but many a mother in this day and time used to do that. And it coincides when they finally were able to get glass bottles and nipples produced so that you could sterilize them so that you could then transport. And so then put that with mothers going to work, the rise in the daycare industry, et cetera, et cetera. And now you see how that happened. But also understand that the rise in obesity comes from when the mother has to work, the mother cannot afford for her own sake, for the sanity and sanctity of her own body, to wake up every 2 to 3 hours to breastfeed the baby when she's got to get up and go to work for some low wage paying job that's going to wear her out. Whether it's my grandmother and people of her day used to do what's called days work. They were house cleaners, manual labor, working in factories during the war, World War II. So that kind of a thing also contributes to the need to do formula. But what if we supported women to where that wasn't necessary for her to work outside the home? Now, the women that are paying attention right now, instead of whining and complaining about having to take care of the children, gratitude would teach you that if you have the opportunity because of the lockdown to be home with your children and to reclaim your power, to reclaim the ability to steer your family and take over your family's nutrition again, you'd see this whole lockdown thing and the ability to work at home. Whoa, the ability to get unemployment while you're working, that's a huge, huge opportunity to redirect the nutrition and the health of your family. However, if you buy into the Virginia Slims aspect of things, or the feminist aspect of things, or it's the my own body, myself thing, then you'll miss it. You'll just totally miss it, because I'll end with this. There is no career. I got alphabet after my name. I've got my resume of my accomplishments is 3 pages long, and it goes all the way back to 1974. And I can tell you that the one credential that I have that I am the most proud of is mother. I've by Allah's grace, I have physically given birth to 3, and by Allah's mercy, I've been a mother, and a direct hands-on involved mother, through marriage to another 8. Yes. And then through what we call village mothering, children whose parents didn't have what we have, or children whose mothers could not be, as I would gently say, in effect, due to circumstance, due to addiction, due to whatever trial that they had to face. These were people that I had a hand in raising. They call me mother. That is my highest achievement. Not obstetrics and gynecology, not biofeedback, not neurolinguistic programming, not being multilingual, computer literate, blah, 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 all that. I helped change and steer the life of another human being. I was a channel, am right now a channel for Allah's mercy, for Allah's compassion. And I cannot think of anything that I'm more proud of, or any other vocation I would rather have. And to all my mothers and all the village mothers that helped bring me where I am through their wisdom, through their trial, through their error, I ask Allah grant them a sweet place in paradise. And to all you young mothers out there, don't believe the hype. When you are a mother, whether or not you give birth to the child or you get the child as a bonus, that's what my village children call me. I'm their bonus mother, right? You get the child that way. What you've done If your efforts were not as valuable as they are, they wouldn't pull you out of the home. Huh? Think about it. So I'd like to thank you, people. I'm looking at what's in the chat here. I'd like to, Brother Abdullah, thank you for your comment. Uh, I love that. I love that. I don't know, do you want me to read those or, yeah. So I don't know how to do this without making this go away. So I'm going to respond to if there are questions in the chat. I'm going to look at these here. All right. Brother Abdullah, I guess this is Adib has given us a link to Dr. David E. Martin. And by the way, you definitely want to look at, follow the link and research David E. Martin. Anything that he has, we've looked at just about everything that he has. I think he's right on point. And I think that this whole thing that we're dealing with the FDA and Dr. Fauci and all these good people, he's really put the lid on it. So he actually will give you stuff for free in PDFs. The Rockefeller family replaced the natural approach to disease to drug company. The drug companies dictated to the medical school the control on how things are. That person who wrote that is absolutely on point. The Rockefeller, Carnegie's, Gettys, all those folks took over the direction of the medical schools in the late 1800s and the early 1900s when they formed the AMA, the American Medical Association, under Morris Fishbein. And at that point, all the naturopaths, the homeopaths, the people who understood herbs, the people who understood water and homeopathy, they began to be systematically eliminated. Yeah. So also, fact here, Rockefellers control and led 90% of the petroleum refineries. Drugs are made from petrochemicals. Fact, absolutely the fact. All the healing began to be directed towards what we know as medicine. And the focus for medical schools became less and less healing and more learning about how to prescribe drugs. Matter of fact, that's what a lot of continuing education is about here. So I've addressed those things. I want to thank you all for your attention. I want to suggest to all of you that you do your research, look up the history of baby formula. Just follow the money trail. No matter what comes at us in these months and years to follow, always look for where the money trail leads. And if you see something from the FDA and the CDC, always keep in mind that those boards of directors contain people who used to be on the pharmaceutical boards. They used to lead, they were executives in pharmaceutical companies. And so their interests are always going to be to look out for those pharmaceutical companies and make sure that laws and things are passed that are going to help them in that respect. So take it all with a grain of salt. And remember that in the world of Allah, you ask and it is given. There is no lack in the world of Allah. There is man-created lack. And when you are on Allah's frequency, when you are aligned with Allah's fitra, everything that you need is already there. And as the Bible says, before you ask, it is given. As the Quran says, I hear the call of every supplicant when he calls upon me. So just know this isn't pie in the sky, psychobabble. It's real. Allah promised it. Allah calls himself the most compassionate and the most merciful. So this baby formula crisis is but one in another series of crises that are due to come. Resolve, if you're breastfeeding, to continue to do so. Take care of yourself, mothers, and you'll be able to take care of your babies. Allah set it up that way. And for anything that I said that was a misstatement, an exaggeration, an inaccuracy. I ask Allah to forgive me for such. My intention was to do only good. For every good that came out of this, all the praise, all the praise belongs to Allah. My best, my highest endeavor is simply that I can be a spigot, a mouthpiece, a channel for information and energy and power that I can pass on to Allah's creation. So for that, I thank you for your attention. I do have a book that is going to be forthcoming. The book will be on defeating diabetes. This is installment one. The other one, I started it before when I said they're coming for the children, but just remember that diabetes is my focus. Defeating diabetes is the mission, and I hope to do everything I can to empower you for that. My email is onesacredservice@yahoo.com. ONE sacred, SACRED, service, SERVICE, @yahoo.com. And if you don't remember that or you didn't get it, you can always get to me through Instructor Bilal, because as you know, I'm kind of close to him. So I'll speak to you again soon. By all means, contact Instructor Bilal and let him know what you'd like me to speak on, and I'll be more than happy to come back. Till then, I love you all. I love you all. I love you all. Stay calm. Allah's got this. Assalam. No. Salam alaikum.
All right.